So concerned expressed with the need for the bylaw, and they did would there be full cost recovery of the business license program. Held an open house September 13th, so I say approximately 15 to 20 people attended. I'm always hesitant to give an estimate of how many people supported or not. I'm not actually asking them sort of tick yes or no, but I would estimate over half the people there supported the bylaw. But some of the criticisms include, so business owners saying that they see little benefit, especially business owners who say they operate in their house and people aren't coming, why do they need a business license? Other topic came up, fairness for business licenses for people pursuing what they do as a hobby, sometimes to make revenue from. Concerns from the finance committee, are the fees going to cover the cost, or is it going to be borne by the general taxpayer? So at the time of writing, we received 9 letters, and I see 2 more on table. So similar to comments from the open house, so the home-based business with no public access, what's their compelling reason to be required a business license? And then again, the small-scale businesses, so poetry, writing, creative arts, contract work out of your house. So the communication committee met to discuss this, I think on Wednesday of last week, and looking at the rollout, so looking at our proposed schedule would be at this meeting on October 9th for consideration of adoption and council move forward, and looking at the timeline of developing sort of applications and education material for implementation January 1st. And so we proposed we worked out a timeline of opening applications sometime in mid-November to looking to start, so people would have their business license in January 1st. And after quite a bit of discussion, sort of working through the logistics of it, thinking that a better plan is actually to work on fully implementing stuff to start accepting applications starting in the new year, with the understanding and even support from council that enforcement then wouldn't begin until the spring of 2019. So I think that in essence we could have an application system up and going by this fall, and we would be doing it and it would be in effect January 1st, but we would rather actually take the extra couple months to make sure that the system's all fully set up, so that when we actually launch, people will be able to can fully explore things like paying online or applying online, things that we currently don't have for our current a planning application or something. There's no online option. They're doing a PDF and you're sending them a check or something, but trying to find some way to make it as simple as possible for businesses. And the other piece then is that a key piece of this and a key benefit the EDC saw was online business registry. And so if you look at various municipal websites, there's a big range of how the online business registry works. So some places essentially will print the PDF and they'll save the PDF of their list and they'll post that up every 6 months or quarterly or whatever. And people could look. And others have a much more interactive thing where you can search by category. So if you want to know who are the plumbers who can work on Bowen, you can actually search plumbers and you'll get a list of plumbers and their phone numbers. You can contact them. But so we'd like to do a little more research into that and actually budget for the costs of that in the 2019 budget, but have that ready to go in January as well. So similar to we're asking people to apply at some point, we can show them this is what it's going to look like. And so from the open house, have a recommended amendment. This is in your council agenda as well, but essentially amending that exemption of farmers market. So some comments were people saying, well, you exempt the farmers market, but what if I'm going to the craft market? Are you going to be policing, as the bylaw officer, going to go around the craft market and knock on every stall and say, where's your business license? And so we said, no, that seems fair to say, okay, the intent is there. It's a farmers market, and the farmers market or the craft market holds the business license, or is then something that is exempt from needing a business license, or a nonprofit or something, or or something else that's somehow exempt or has a business license, that would be a permitted thing. And then recommend going forward to the second and third reading with those amendments.
I'm going to jump in first if I may.
Well, I've got a couple of
Technical
comments,
questions?
technical questions.
Okay.
I sent Daniel an email when I was reading this last night. We took out in 5I, we took out the words, if the rental agreement is subject to the Residential Tenancy Act. We shouldn't have, because Airbnb and short-term vacation rentals and all that stuff, or B&B, is the renting of a single-family dwelling or a secondary suite. So, but rather than putting in rental agreement, just have it say the renting of a single-family dwelling, secondary suite, duplex, or rooms therein, if it is subject to the Residential Tenancy Act. Because you don't have to have the rental agreements are verbal or whatever. So the reason we took it out is didn't want to ask everybody for a hard copy of their rental agreement. So that needs to go back in there. And
So
the
just,
other,
may I just jump in? So that's just to clarify,
that it's,
that if it is subject to the Residential Tenancy Act, it is exempt.
it's exempt, but it doesn't give Airbnbs and short-term vacation rentals an argument to say, well, we're renting, so we're exempt.
Yeah.
In 5.1, sub 2, it's an operator of a retail business delivering or picking up items sold by the retail business. Is a manufacturer a retail business? Because window manufacturers, truss manufacturers, they usually deliver the stuff over here for a building site, so. I'm wondering if we need to put in the wording, an operator of a retail or manufacturing business. Because you separated manufacturing underneath, but
Yeah.
only delivering to merchants, not
Yeah.
to homeowners.
Yeah, I follow you. So I mean, because it's, yeah, if you're delivering stuff for a, like
Job site.
a job site, then
Yeah.
the assumption, I guess, would be that either it's delivering to a contractor with a business license, so they're the contractor doing it, or to the homeowner.
Yeah.
And you're saying so that, but for a job site as opposed to,
To the building center.
Yeah. yeah,
And the contractor's not reselling it, because
Yeah.
the homeowners could be paying for it,
yeah,
yeah. So I couldn't see a downside to adding it.
yeah,
So putting the words after in 5.1, little 2 i's, an operator of a retail or manufacturing business, delivering or picking up items sold by the retail or manufacturing business, would just make it
Yeah.
clear. And then there's a small, I think in number 6, license periods, it would read better if it said the period of the annual license begins January 1st and ends and expires December 31st, so it's consistent wording. And number 10, all fees collected by the license, this is for you, Raj. All fees collected by the license inspector shall be paid forthwith to the chief financial officer, who shall deal with the said fees in the manner provided by the act. What act? Are we talking about the community charter? And why don't we just say all fees shall be payable to Long Island municipality,
You can say that.
which is real simple.
yeah.
Yes, I don't have any objection
And
to that.
I didn't know which one of us you were gonna take on the trip with you.
What was the wording again that you?
All fees shall be payable to Long Island municipality. Okay, I think that was mine. There's a couple of small typos, but those don't, and a small clarification in 16. 16 talks about beginning of each licensing period. And the definition in 6 is license period. So I think we need to change that to the beginning of each license period.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if we need a more instance one for you. As in number 11, the application for a license shall be in the form or forms as prescribed from time to time?
It's probably clearer to say as
Yeah.
prescribed.
Okay. And just so people in partnerships realize they're getting a deal, because they're only paying one fee in Vancouver, I always paid we all individually, they collected licensing fees from 26 of us. So, we're the partners in the CA firm.
Okay. Does that cover off your
I
points?
think that's all my technical stuff.
Okay, now, if I can just jump in for a minute.
I wanted to get that out of the way before.
Thank you. We appreciate it. I know there's strong approval on council other than myself for this one. And I'm trying to reconcile myself with what's the real value of this to this community, especially reading all of the feedback that we've gotten from people. And so, first of all, I think that from the traditional reason for business licenses was to regulate location, nuisance, undesirable things, and there were regulations that went along with it. We don't have any regulations in the wings waiting to go into effect. Putting in business licensing so that someday we can put in regulations, you know, makes no sense to me. If you've got no regulations, no need for enforcement, no problems you're trying to solve. But I think that what we could sell this is the fact that we live in a data-driven world. Everything now, you know, dealing with TransLink mirrors and stuff and getting all these brilliant people in there, everything is nuanced information that we're gleaning from this, that, and the other thing that nobody ever appreciated how important that was. You know, like traffic jams because of how fast your cell phone little blue dot is moving, all of that sort of stuff. So I think there's in a sort of post-materialism business environment, there is a reason to want good data. And good data does come from collecting it within the community. But I think that a couple of things that would soften this is, one, we don't need a licensing period of 1 year. I mean, who made that one up? I mean, that's just been around forever. There's no intrinsic logic to saying, well, you have to pay us another $100 every year. You've been in that same location for the last 10 years. You know, nothing's ever changed. You tick same as before box and give another $100. I think that a longer licensing period for your would not be a problem, whether it's 2 years or 3 years or whatever. You could update your data frequently enough given the number of rollover we have. And the other thing is, I would suggest that you have initially a free sign-up period. It's a fillable PDF form online with the municipality. Everybody who voluntarily registers their business by the 15th of March 2019 pays nothing for the initial licensing period of 2 years or whatever. Try to get compliance, because from what I see, people are going to say, well, when you catch me, that's when I'm going to sign up. And what I do in my basement that you know nothing about, that I'm selling to people in Arizona, you're never going to catch me. So the data's not there. You're not collecting the data. It's better to get the data for free. And don't worry about regulating the guy telling stuff to people in Arizona out of his basement. Anyway, those are my suggestions for a way of softening this to all of those people who did come out to oppose this bylaw. Right. So anyway, Maureen, you were next up.
Yeah. I'm just thinking through the implications of what you just suggested. Part of the problem of what you've suggested in having an initial free period is that by law, this program is required to be revenue neutral and cost recovery.
Right.
So if there were an initial free period, essentially the general taxpayer is going to be paying for this program. So that's problematic from a legal perspective, is my understanding. The transition period that you suggested, when this initially came before council, the full report back in November of last year, there was an expectation that this would move somewhat more quickly than it has. And what the task force had recommended was that there be an initial 6-month transition period between July and December of this year. So when we reviewed in our meeting earlier last week, the communications plan, it was really clear that trying to get something in place with firm enforcement by January of the coming year was just going to be brutal for staff. And it also would mean that we would have that great rush of people who did want to comply putting in all of their documentation and all of their questions in roughly a 1-month period. So there is still a transition period that's recommended in this report and in the communication plan, but it's a 3-month period and the fees still apply. People can take up until April or so to get everything sorted out, but it's not a free period that's being recommended. The other thing that's sort of running concurrently with this is, if you recall, we made a proposal to a grant application to the Rural Dividend Fund to have in place an economic development officer to work over the next 2 years. Part of that proposal states that the EDO, if we're successful with the grant application, would be working during a time when we are implementing the business licensing program. So those two things are somewhat linked, hopefully, assuming we get the funding. So I'm supportive of what Daniel has presented here, and I'm in agreement with the amendments that Councillor Morris has proposed. There were a couple of things that I wondered about that I was thinking it might make things a bit more palatable. The home-based businesses that have non-public access and the fee that's associated with that. I wondered if some adjustment of the fee level might be appropriate. Part of the public access home-based business, that has to do with traffic. It might have to do with impact on roads. You make a long list there. If the non-public access fee were further reduced, possibly even to 0, I don't know whether council would support that, but it might make it more palatable to those folks. Part of the reason for wanting that information is that we have no data at all on business failures on Bowen. We simply don't know. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence. We can see when a retail store closes or when the shop changes hands, but we don't know about those little entrepreneurs that are working in their basement. We don't know what they're doing. We don't want to know a heck of a lot about what they're doing. It just would be nice to know a bit more about a segment of our local on-island economy that has potential for growth. And if this fee is going to prevent us from getting that source of data to help us figure out how to support those people, how to help market them, then I would consider supporting dropping the fee to 0. The other question I had, and this came up in some of the feedback from I believe it was from a committee member in EDC, it was a question about the proposed amendment that's in the recommendation. A person who pays a user fee to a farmer's market. The suggestion there was to add licensed farmer's market or craft market organization. I'm assuming that we were expecting that a farmer's market and a craft market wouldn't be licensed.
I think we've exempted them, haven't we?
If they're a nonprofit organization. And we've exempted them not from licensing, but we've exempted them from payment. So I
think that works. I think that works. Like, I think there's some things that would be exempt from needing a license. So you could, if you are, well, like in the municipality, for example, is exempt, right? So if we ran a farmer's market, we wouldn't need a business license to do it, but that we'd probably read that into it anyways to say, well, we're licensed, we're exempt from licensing, I guess. But it can't be like a rogue farmer's market that would require a business license.
So can I just confirm, are you suggesting that it is a good idea to put licensed into the recommendation, or do you think it's understood?
So my question is the farmer's market that happens at Fix, does that have a license?
Well, they don't have a business license because they don't have a business license. And then I guess I'm not clear who, so if the organization is a provincial or federal government or agency of the government, so it's the school board running a farmer's market, they would be exempt. Or a craft fair. If it's run by a non-profit, then they would need a business license. They would pay $0 for it. And I guess maybe it's unnecessary because if somebody ran a farmer's market that needed a business license, we still wouldn't go after the stalls in the business market. We would go after the organizer of the farmer's market and say, you need a business license, and then everybody else doesn't need one.
Okay, so,
Fundraising activities by a nonprofit don't need a license,
Yeah,
so.
so the nonprofit does, like a nonprofit operating on Bowen, but I guess I'm a nonprofit from off Bowen coming on.
Well, no, it says the following types
Yeah.
of businesses do not
It
require
does.
a license.
Yeah.
Type.
Fundraising activities held by a nonprofit organization.
Right, but I'm saying so a nonprofit organization in general that's operating on Bowen needs a business license, but their fee is $0. But then their fundraising activity doesn't, right? So if all they did was fundraising, then they wouldn't need a business license. But if they're just generally a nonprofit that does fundraising,
Still
they would need a business license, they shouldn't pay for it.
Okay, I'm going to go to Gary first.
It just a clarification, I just wanted to, so the CSA runs the Christmas market.
Okay.
So under this, does the CSA then have to apply for a business license to hold the Christmas market?
They
To
would-
give exemption to all
Call
the,
that a fundraising activity.
Let's
That's
let
fine.
Daniel answer the question.
So again, I think so there's some things that are exempt. So a fundraising activity by a nonprofit is exempt, doesn't
Exempt,
require
so-
it. But if the CSA does other things, they're an organization, they're a nonprofit society that's registered, that does things other than just a fundraising piece. Then maybe we're saying they do need a business license, but they don't pay anything for it.
right. So
And then-
they are fundraising, so they are not required. So they're doing it for fundraising, so they
Yeah.
wouldn't be required.
Yeah.
So then we look at the farmer's market that happens, how does, I don't know who actually runs that. Does anybody know here?
The farmer's market?
Yeah.
I think it might be partly us, because we fund part of Sarah's position as community education, or whatever that's called.
I think it's the Bowen
Coordinator.
Agriculture Alliance.
Are we going down a rabbit hole here, guys?
Yeah.
Wait, I was just
Yeah.
wanting to see how this applies, if we're trying to capture all these small little hobbies, right, to give them exemption, does it accomplish what we're trying to accomplish here? That's what, those are our two main areas, right? So that was all I was trying to clarify, that currently as it's set up, those who participate in those two activities would be exempt. Am I correct?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, Gary and then Allison.
Yeah, I think we gotta go back and look at the reasons why we're decided to put business licensing in. It's a tool in our toolbox. If we don't have people with business licenses on Bowen, we cannot control whether they're doing it healthfully. Vancouver Health is in there, and that sort of thing, and they're doing it properly, and we don't have the ability to say, well, you know what, you can't do that anymore, because they say, well, why not? You don't have business licenses, and that is the only tool we have to say, hey, come on, let's conform, let's do what you're supposed to do here. I think the biggest problem with this, and any of the responses that I've read, there seems to be a lack of communication here. Because this isn't a draconian thing to go out, it's not gonna make any money. It's totally tax neutral, not tax neutral, but fee neutral. And we're only doing it as a data measure, and that's what I'm trying to get through to people is this, we're not here to control you, we're not here to create more government. It's data, it's good government, and it's a tool in our toolbox to manage the businesses on Bowen. And I think that's about it. It's also, we don't have to get all the little bits and pieces here. There's going to be things that evolve as we go along. It is a living document, and it could be subject to change in the future if it is too repressive in some areas.
Okay, Allison?
We've been at this for years, and I think it's something we do need to do, as the report says, and not just because everybody else does it, but because people phone up and say, do you have business licensing? And we say no, and they then think that's open sesame to do whatever you want. And having a business license will enable some of the control of some of the noxious things happening. I was just reading through the North Vancouver home-based business little folder that I picked these things up as I've been going around. And one of the things they say, you shan't do explosives sailor, hotel, or manufacturer handling of weapons or explosives in your home. Well, I'd kind of like to know if somebody was going to set up a business next door and start doing that. So it gives us the control that, and it gives us the data we need to apply for a lot of these grants, and as Maureen says, to help the businesses. Now, Dave Pollard, in his submission, dealing with Murray's question, made an excellent comment about charging an application fee
Mhm.
and then waiving it for the first 3 months or 6 months, which will encourage voluntary application. But it also helps with that initial upfront cost of just processing and dealing with all the applications. But, so I actually kind of thought, and I do recall, I think others do that. And then it's only the one-time thing,
If I
yeah.
could respond to that, it's not common in the small communities that we looked at.
Okay,
If you're in a larger community, yes, and they often have very complicated schedules, but we didn't see that in the little communities.
yeah. So both of our experiences of having licenses in larger communities. Okay.
Anything else on this one?
Well, and I'm not in favor of waiving it totally.
Okay.
I don't think, because of, matching the dollars, that was the big concern from the finance committee, was this shouldn't be a burden on the general taxpayer, and if we don't raise enough revenue in the licensing, then it will be a burden on the general taxpayer. The other question was, is there something in here, if you don't apply for a license and you're running a business, do you just get fined? Or is it a double fee for your license because you didn't apply?
That's
Like-
one of my
Like a
questions.
stop work order?
Does Daniel know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
So sure, so it's, yes, Sue Ellen, then Maureen, and Michael.
Okay, I'm in favor of the motion. Generally, I'll probably be voting that way, depending on what else everybody says. I don't know if I'm in conflict of interest. As somebody who runs a little business, maybe I should be recusing myself from the $50 a year, but, we run a consulting business from our home. And I just wanted to add that I think compliance would be better if people understood the data gathering side of it if we didn't charge that $50 a year for a home-based, non-access business. Personally, I think that would go over better. People would understand. As with us talking to organizations through looking for internet connectivity and trying to find ways to help businesses on Bowen. We need local jobs. We need good local jobs and local economy. It was hard to argue that we needed better internet connectivity when we didn't know how many home-based businesses or consultants were working in their spare room. So I think that would help us help people and the community. I do relate to some of the questions, like the poet who wrote us several letters, and like making $300 a year, I think it was something that he mentioned. Does that mean he has to get a license? And I saw some of the other concerns about the amounts, and I wondered if we may want to put in an enforcement policy that goes along with this, so that it's clear to people when the bylaw officer can enter their business, is something I read, or when and if somebody would be fined, how much, that kind of thing. All of that, I think, is yet to come. And I think that would help some of the other comments I saw about how are you going to manage or implement the education and enforcement side of it. So that's just a suggestion, and I think we can do that after the fact, but I think we need the bylaw, and I'll be voting in favor.
Michael.
Okay, I'd just like to answer it. I am, broadly speaking, very much in favour of this, and I'd like to just deal with a couple of issues which I think is out there, because I don't want to see this being ridiculed for obvious reasons, because it doesn't make sense. Let us take, for example, this very, very small business, this $300 a year, just to paint a picture. Okay, is it or isn't it? Do we have a dollar threshold? How are we, just common sense, how are we going to deal with it? That's one question. I've been asked the question, okay, I have a business at home, and do you know what I do? I edit books for people, and I work, and I do, what do you call it, wordsmithing for various folk downtown. So I said, well, very simple. When you fill in your income tax form, as part of your small business, do you claim part of your home against your income tax? Because you're entitled to, if that's your business and you get a fee for it, you can claim part of your home for tax relief.
Yeah, but you get caught.
But, so, my answer was, hey, if that's what you do, right? Which is perfectly, we have every reason, you get an income, and to offset the cost of the income, you take part of your home, because you've got your little office there. Then probably, that would tell me that you should have a license, right? Because that's your business, and you're set up as a business, and that's what you do. Just as one, I'm trying to get some very simple, easy to follow benchmarks. And I do think we have to answer the poet and the one-man band at $300 a year, and we have to be able to give a common sense answer to that individual, because we're supporting business licensing. And that's one of the questions we have to answer in a logical, matter-of-fact way. Daniel, searching for this platform, there was an extremely valuable correspondence which thought that some of these platforms can actually separate people who are in the plumbing business, people in the roofing business, yada, yada, yada. And that's sure valuable, because on the municipal website, if you're looking for people registered to do plumbing, there is a list, and that's maybe well to their advantage. My question is, do you have time to find a platform? It could be the easiest thing, and it's an hour's job, or it could be looking at the platforms that all the other municipalities use our size, and this is the best platform. My simple question to you is, are you able to do it? Because I think to support this, which I'm doing, I'd just like to get a couple of the obvious questions, anything that would draw it into obvious criticism. Can we deal with it before we, let's deal with it before, not after. And if we are going to deal with the penalties aspects after, because we don't have time to deal with it before, then we need to be very clear and upfront and say that is to follow. So, speaking in support of this, if we could just clear up some of these little niggling issues that have the potential of bringing what we're trying to do in obvious disrepute, and I don't want to see that. So,
Okay, I'm going to just jump in for a moment, if I may. One offset then potentially for a free sign-up period would be either a nominal fee of $10, something like that, or a penalty, say, of a double fee for people who did not voluntarily register. So if you're looking at cost recovery, right, there's very, very little cost to somebody who voluntarily fills out a form online. The cost is going to be an enforcement. So if you want proper cost recovery, you should be charging for the enforcement rather than the voluntary compliance. That was one thing, but another suggestion that I'd like to make to you is that you give second reading rather than second and third reading today, because I think there's enough discussion around this table that you all realize that this is not fully thought through to the point of making it a bylaw today. It's more that you want to move forward, you're all in favor of it, you like the idea, but you're not there yet. So I will go to Melanie and then Alice.
So I agree with what you just said. I would be very comfortable with moving this forward to second reading, because I think for me, reading the response coming back, there are two issues. And one is this threshold for very small businesses. We're talking about what does someone do with the excess candles that they made from the farmer's market? Does that, so I think to bring the business community along, I think if we could have some refinement there, a little bit of softening. I've heard lots of different options, though, with staff coming back with a report on what is actually viable. I am in very support of us moving forward on this, because I recollect, I thought the impetus for getting this going was this was one of the tools we needed to start regulating short-term rentals. And we all know that businesses have a hard time trying to find accommodation for staff. So again, this also strengthens the need for this, for business licenses. So I'd like to see that come back, how we're going to manage the the very small businesses. The other thing is, I think we also need perhaps to look at communication on the benefits of the process before we go to a public hearing, so that people,
This doesn't go to public hearing.
Yeah.
doesn't it? Sorry.
No.
Okay.
yeah.
Fair enough, sorry, I thought it went for a public hearing. Anyway, that's the engagement we've had back on it, so I think people really have more confidence in the process when they felt that their issues have been heard. So I'd like to see some more communication back out to the business community about the benefits of the program.
Okay, Allison is next up.
Well, second and third reading is adopting, and all that communication could happen between third and fourth reading. Any bylaw under the Local Government Act, the Community Charter, is we enforce it or we don't enforce it. We can choose whether we enforce our bylaws or not. So if you look at the definition of business, it means carrying on of an undertaking of any kind or nature for the purposes of gain or profit. So the casual selling of a few candles, one could put an argument that it isn't for the purpose of gain or profit. So you're in that policy, so having an enforcement policy. And it can be amended at any time. And we don't have the, what's the term for the penalties? We don't have the
Fines? Fine schedule?
fine schedule or anything for that, right?
No.
So I think we can deal with some of these marginal things through the fining schedule.
Well, it's simply,
And
I-
so
I'm
I
just
guess the
reading the
question
feedback.
is, if we were only gonna give it second reading because we wanted to provide an amendment to clarify something, what is that something that we would need the actual amendment to the bylaw? And given that the staff is the issue, the early compliance. But it's not a large fee in relation to, for home-based business, non-public access.
it's a matter of getting compliance, but I'm going to go to Gary and then Sue Ellen, and then we've got to pretty much wrap this up. This could take all day.
Yeah, good.
Uh,
Just a point on the short-term vacation rentals are actually not legal, so we can't give them